Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending the town council meeting tonight. We'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to start by saying that this meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. We'll move on to number 3, which is additions, deletions to agenda, which we actually have some additions tonight. So we're going to move agenda item 11.1 to item 10.1A. And we're going to move an item to 6.1, a council recognition of a local artist. And we're going to add 11.1, proposed town boundary expansion, a letter to Modal Municipality District of Lunenburg Council. So those are 3 changes that we have to tonight's meeting that have come in fairly last minute. We wanted to get them dealt with tonight. So I'd need a recommendation in front of us. The council approved the agenda for May 27th, 2025 meeting with the discussed additions and changes. So someone prepared, moved by Councilor Strong. Is there a seconder? Councilor Babineau. Okay. Any further discussion or question on the changes or additions? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. So we'll move on to 4.1. Recommendation that council approve the agenda for the May 27th, 2025 meeting with the changes. Is there a mover? Moved, seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 4.5. Approval of the minutes. The council approved the May 13th, 2025 meeting minutes as presented. Deputy Mayor moved. Seconded by Councilor Greek. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. We'll move right into 6.1, and I'm going to hand this over to Councilor Daphne.
So back in March, on the community bulletin board, I saw a post by Lyla looking to expand her painting, looking for commissions. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take the jump. I'm going to take the leap. And I contacted Lyla and we had a chat at Tim Hortons with her mom, probably for about an hour. We talked about a whole bunch of different things. And there's one thing that the 3 of us have in common, a personal thing, but won't go into that. But we talked about growing up in Lunenburg, what I could remember about growing up in Lunenburg, family. And then I told her that my view of Lunenburg is not like everybody else's view. So most of the time when you see Lunenburg, you see the waterfront picture. I'm not normal, for those of you who know me. I like to be different. So I said to her, I gave her some memories from growing up. I talked about the buildings on the waterfront, the color. I talked about how much and how Lunenburg talks to me. And those of you who were born here, grew up here, you'll understand what I mean about that vibe. Being born here, it's just a different feeling. So I also then said to Lyla, put 4 things in the painting that I know exactly what they mean to me. So I gave her the 4 things and I said, okay, off you go paint. So she painted and painted and painted and kept me updated. And she's here tonight to present me with the painting, which I haven't seen yet. So I'm going to pass it over to Lyla.
Hello. She took a lot of the stuff I was gonna say, so I don't have that much. My name is Lyla Béliveau-Woods, and I'm an artist. I'm just a few years shy of being born and raised in Lunenburg. I'm almost 17, and my whole life I've had a passion for creativity, but this past year especially, that passion has kind of exploded, and I've thrown myself into painting. And I haven't sold many things because it's been really hard to get out there, but one day posted on Facebook that I wanted to paint and she responded, so I painted. Um, yeah, I guess I don't really have that much to say, but yeah. I don't know.
You good?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, let's look. Ready?
Yeah.
Mom and dad. Oh, mom and dad.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Do you want me to explain it? Okay.
yeah.
So the four things that she wanted included were her parents' initials, which are DD, so I put them up in the clouds, and a Coca-Cola bottle because she loves Coke. A whale tail. I don't remember the reasoning for that, if I'm being
I
honest.
just like whales.
You just like whales. What? Um, and a black cat for her mother. And I also incorporated the railroad tracks because she would spend a lot of time around there, and a bicycle because she biked a lot. Shooting star because she'd watch the shooting stars, and then yeah, all the bright colors and stuff. And then this, it can either be Adams and Knickle or Fisheries Museum, whatever you really feel like. I already said that. That's the first thing I said. Yeah. So yeah, this is it.
Oh, yeah. Come on.
We're gonna mix it. Okay.
You can do it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Presentations and recognitions like this, we are having almost one a month now, and it's the real fun part of sitting up here, especially when it's young adults that come up here and we present things to them. It's great to see young aspiring artists or athletes within the community. So thank you very much. Great job. It's beautiful. So we'll move on to number 7. Regular public input and questions. We don't have anybody signed up for that. So we'll move on to 8, which is correspondence. And it's basically just correspondence for people to review. This council, there really is no correspondence listed, so we'll just move on to 9. We do have public hearing. 9.1 is the noise bylaw update. So this is our public hearing. So I'll just go over the rules quickly. Staff and or applicant will provide an overview of the agenda items. That'll be staff. Staff and the applicant will answer questions from us, council. Then the meeting's open to the public with input, questions, or input. Each person is limited to 5 minutes. Each person must state their name, and questions are directed through the chair. So pretty straightforward. Once we decide to close the hearing, there's no further questions or comments on the matter will be received. So we'll start with, is it Shania doing it, or who's presenting it, or Kayla? Kayla, okay, go ahead, Kayla.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so this is co-creative between Shania and I. So I'll lay out a little bit of the groundwork here, and Shania and I are both here to answer some questions. So tonight we have the final version of the updated noise bylaw. So to give a little bit of background, council first gave reading to this bylaw at its April 22nd meeting and reviewed the initial draft at the April 1 committee of the whole meeting. At these 2 meetings, we talked about how the current noise bylaw has been challenging for staff to enforce due to some of the vague or subjective language. So the updated version addresses this by introducing some more measurable standards, like whether noise causes physical vibrations, it interferes with conversations within a home, or is clearly audible from 100 feet during the quiet hours. Throughout this process of drafting the new bylaw, we tried to be intentional about balancing the needs of both residents and the realities of running a business or hosting events in Lunenburg. Also throughout this process, we advertised for public input, and we received about 7 questions and comments from residents. So some of the key things we heard were concerns about vehicle noise, questions about marine and industrial work, suggestions to use decibel levels as a measurement tool. And then a few residents had some concerns about unattended sounds, like unattended sound systems, and whether someone could just turn off some loud music for a couple of minutes and then turn it back on for a long time. So most of that feedback we felt was really providing some clarity on some few questions or some general feedback. But there were some really good input that we heard that we thought really made sense in the bylaw. So we've added that in this next version, mainly in section 4, you'll see. And then we've also done a couple of smaller tweaks as we went and re-looked at it again. So from the last time you folks saw it, I'm reading 1, we've highlighted those changes in yellow. That's included in your agenda package. Also included in your agenda package is a little bit of a rundown again of those general comments we received from the public about it, and then kind of staff's response to those comments, which we hope are helpful. So basically with that, there's the bylaw. If anyone has any questions, Shania and I are both here and happy to answer them.
Thank you. So does anyone, Councillor Daphne?
I'm not as prepared as I thought I was, but anyways, I'll just mumble through. A couple things that don't really settle well with me, but I'm okay, I guess, with them if we go through with them. I checked on a couple noise bylaws, a couple different places around the province, and the municipality of Chester has a 150-foot boundary. I know that doesn't sound like much more, it's only 50 feet, but if you imagine 100 feet, that's only the length of a basketball court. Or if you're familiar with cars, my Toyota Yaris is 14 feet long, so imagine only 7 little Yarises lined end to end. I know, but she's very reliable. So I guess I would like to see maybe we go from 100 to 150. The other two things that bother me, and I understand how hard it is, and I talked to Councillor Strawn about this, the decibel level. And it's kind of, you know, it's not in my backyard. So 4 times out of 7, and sometimes 5 times out of 7, at 5:45 in the morning, there's a car that's loud enough to vibrate the windows in my place. And I live at the corner of Victoria and Green. So that's kind of annoying, to say the least. I also heard from someone back at town who, within a block of her place, there's someone that just sits in the driveway and revs the engine. Not sure why, but it has all the bells and whistles of a young person with a fancy car. And I know how hard it is to use the decibel thing. I get that. And that's why I said I probably would let that pass by. But the 100-foot thing, I'd really like to see it, I think, go to 150 feet. The other thing I need clarification on is under section 8, short-term activity CAO approval. Notice of approved short-term activities will be posted on the town's social media channels, official website, and other appropriate public communication channels as determined by the town. Now, you'll have to help my memory. What do we do in the case of movies, where sometimes we only have 12 to 24 hours to deal with something like that?
Yeah, so typically that onus is on the film company. So that's a part of the film permitting process. So when folks are applying to get a film permit with the Town of Lunenburg, that's a tick box where we say, we need to have this notice and you need to deliver it. And what that looks like of either directly putting it into their PO box, or sometimes it's
Door to door.
door to door. So just to speak to a little bit about the other communication channels, that's also an opportunity. We didn't want to be so strict in the language of the bylaw that can still be determined as an operational procedure. So if we write in the bylaw, we will always do X, Y, and Z, that kind of confines us to the box. So by keeping this language a little bit more vague, not that we always want to be vague in a bylaw, this just really helps us to like understand what our needs are. So if it's a really big one that's going to impact a lot of folks, maybe that's where we look at everybody needs it in their PO box. So as we explore different ways to communicate with folks, it's not, you know, putting us right into a tight box of like, we have to do it this way. It gives a little bit of leeway of flexibility to be like, based on this situation, this requires more communication.
Okay, so back to the 100-foot thing. Like I said, I know 50 feet is not much more, but I wonder what my colleagues think about going from 100 to 150 feet.
Just to speak on that a little bit too. So the 100 feet was just during like the quiet time hours. So that's why we went with the shorter distance, because we want to respect the quiet time from 11 to 7. Just to clarify.
100 feet seems short to me. Just means that I can't talk outside after 11 o'clock at night and before 7 in the morning. So at least I know myself well enough to know that. So. Councillor Fullerton.
I thank you to the staff for all the work they've done on this. The only concern that I have in this moment is giving our bylaw enforcement officer the robust support that she needs in terms of definitions, clarifications of the different types of noise that are disruptive and offensive to people. And I think that in terms of measuring the noise, and we want to be objective about how we measure the noise, I think that to add decibel measurements is not a bad thing for certain types of noise complaints. It's probably not necessary for other types of noise complaints. But I wouldn't want to discount that as a means to use to measure the decibel levels of a noise that's considered disruptive. I just want to throw it out there because I think that we have to give her as much equipment to, or you know, enough different means of measuring to be really clear when it's established that there's a noise violation.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just to add for the clarification, as we've been saying, this was really co-developed with Shania and making sure that it's a bylaw that works for her and is practically enforceable. And Shania has like support with our CMP, as she's alluded to in previous meetings. Again, with the decibel thing, and again, like there is an opportunity to explore if that's the will of council and you want to explore that, absolutely. It just comes when we talked, you know, from a legal perspective, there is a little bit of training that goes with the decibel reading and making sure we have the proper equipment that's like up to snuff and recertified, and just making sure those have been tossed out in court cases. You know, if the decibel route is to be explored, definitely, we just have to make sure we check all the hits and balances to make sure we're doing the decibel thing properly.
And just to respond to that, I think it would be important for us to understand what the standards are for decibel levels and what's considered to be beyond normal. So if we had established standards for decibel levels, then that's the other half.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, further to Councillor Fullerton's comments with regard to decibel levels too. I had previously served on council and there were issues that, you know, where decibel levels were raised as a means of measuring and of determining what was disruptive. And we didn't have that at that point in time either, as you can tell from the bylaw that we're updating. And I think as not necessarily and understand the requirement for court and how, you know, calibrated and a certain quality of equipment and training is required to do that. But just for our information and just for the information of the public and the people who are trying to understand for themselves and our citizens and even businesses, if they're purchasing a piece of equipment, if you're getting a generator, if you're installing a piece of equipment that's required for business, and there's an understood level that can be determined to be disruptive. So whether for example, we've used the criteria of distance, and we've used the criteria of things like causing vibrations. So at what decibel level do those things happen, generally speaking? And if that kind of more finite number were included, not necessarily for legal purposes, but for the benefits of our staff in informing people that, generally speaking, this would be found to be disruptive and may cause vibrations and may be determined to be disruptive at 100 or 150 feet, then you may want to look further into the equipment you have at hand and that kind of thing. So it just as another means of quantifying or qualifying that problem.
Councillor Daphne?
So just for information's sakes, the municipality of the District of Guysborough, the decibel level from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. is 65. And then quiet time 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. is 55. Town of Mahone Bay, from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's 70. And then 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. it's 55, which says is average room noise. And then the town of Wolfville, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. it's 65, and 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. it's 55. So I'll just throw that out there, that they do have it in their bylaw. I do not know if they've ever been challenged on it or anything like that, but it is in their bylaw.
I've just asked whether it's the bylaw officer that administers the bylaw or the RCMP, because I think the equipment for, if I was a defense lawyer, the first thing I'm going to go after is to say that the decibel reader is off. And if they sit on a shelf, I know they go off. Most air compressors and sorry, I've got a bad one today, but most air compressors and machinery like that have the decibels written on the side. So if it's something like that, you're going to clearly know what the decibel is. And it will actually give you the length of the thing. I don't know if that adds to it or not, but I know from an RCMP perspective, they would have that equipment. It's expensive equipment, but they would keep it calibrated. I'm not sure our bylaw officer would have that kind of opportunity.
Personally, I don't feel we need the decibel meter in there myself. I like it the way it's written. It gives our bylaw officer more jurisdiction, and it actually brings a little more common sense and a little more you can use your judgment in certain things. It is written there what you can and can't do, but under certain circumstances you can make a judgment call, and I like that. I know one of our neighboring communities that have a decibel meter in their bylaw ran into trouble when they brought it out early on in the system because somebody was practicing their musical instrument outside during the day, and it was actually higher than the decibel meter. So they called the bylaw officer, and technically it was in the bylaw, so it had to be dealt with. So that means if you have a child, for example, in the school band and they practice the flute maybe outside, they would actually be higher than the decibel meter. And I don't think in a community you want to stop somebody from being able to do that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Maybe at 3 a.m., yes, but at 3 p.m., I don't think that should be it. But if you have it in the bylaw and it breaks the decibel meter, you don't have a lot of rule to bend there. I don't think so. I don't like the decibel meter. I don't think, quite frankly, we've had a big issue with noise complaints in town. There's a few pocketed areas that we know where they are. We know there's been an issue. So if this is a bylaw that both the bylaw officer and staff have agreed would hopefully solve those issues, then I'm fine with the way it's written, because it's obviously being changed and updated to actually go at the certain areas we feel we can't deal with at this point, the way it's written. So that would be my thought on the whole bylaw. And again, bylaws can come back here in 6 months to a year's time if we realize this was really a mistake, or we really should have had a decibel meter in there, reading in there, then we can always change it at that time. But at this point, I'm certainly, unless I hear something really crazy here in the next little while, I'm prepared to move this at this point. So that's my 2 cents worth. Deputy Mayor?
So just to I guess further qualify the concern with regard to decibels is that I think it's important. I recognize what the mayor's saying, and we don't want normal activity and things that are considered by reasonable people. And I guess that's, the reasonable person kind of standard is what we're trying to determine here. So if it's someone practicing a musical instrument, or if it's an activity like mowing a lawn or running a power saw or something that may, I don't know, because I'm not clear on what decibels are and how far they travel. But they're affected by wind and so on, right? As according to our staff report. So I don't know what those things are, but I think, again, applying the reasonable person standard to those kinds of complaints to override the decibel if it's a short period of time thing, or if it's something that's, a reasonably, an activity that's considered reasonable in a neighborhood, then, I just think perhaps there's a way to look at both and just using some kind of decibel reading, for example, as Councillor Strawn mentioned, if it's on a piece of equipment, that this piece of equipment generates a decibel level of, a certain number, and it's going to be run for an extended period of time, then the purchaser business or citizen would then perhaps look for a different piece of equipment, because they would recognize that it would be an infringement on the enjoyment of the property of their neighbors. So I'm just wondering if there isn't a way to sort of find a balance between those two things.
Councillor Greek, you go ahead, and then Councillor Fullerton.
Everyone's fighting to speak tonight. Further to Deputy Mayor's point around the reasonable person standard, I think, some of my concerns is kind of around the noise that is, I suppose, generated by a person themselves. For example, if you have someone who's quite soft-spoken, chances are they're probably never going to have an issue with a noise bylaw. But some people, for whatever reason, are a little bit louder, and on a natural basis, not naming any names in this room, certainly. And, I struggle with the definition, especially, we have under section 4, number 3, the provocative and disturbing content. The noise includes excessive shouting, profanity, or disruptive content intended to provoke or disturb others. Well, some people, they might not necessarily have the intent to provoke, but there's issues sometimes with those around them, especially if they're outside having a gathering or something, perhaps. I'm not saying necessarily in the evening. This could be at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, but some could be bothered by some of those around them that aren't necessarily intending to cause or provoke their neighbors or those that are in their area. Sorry, I'm losing my words here. But I suppose to clear up or wrap up this point, I'm having a bit of a struggle with the definition of what is considered excessively loud or disruptive, because it might not be the same for each individual. And I'd like to see something that is a little bit more defined and clearly laid out to define what we would consider excessively loud or disruptive.
Councillor Fullerton?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I'm going with it too, is that for us to define the different types of noise that exist within our community, and some that are people performing activities of normal daily living, and then there are commercial activities and then there are industrial activities and special event activities. And I think that each of them needs to be treated and approached differently when there are noise complaints. And so I think that, again, back to the different means, all the tools in the toolkit for measuring objectively the level of noise that is causing the complaint.
Anybody else? Kayla, do you have anything?
Yeah, so the intent of the way it is written, really, when we're talking about residential noise, it's not. So I think that's where we put in that rule too about persistent, loud, and longer noises. So the intent is that it's not to deter a casual barbecue or a child's birthday party happening. It's say if someone were playing amplified music all day, every day, then under this bylaw, it would be like, oh, this is persistently loud and consistent. It's not a one-off party on a Saturday night, or you're having a few folks over for some drinks. That's why we're trying to strike. So sometimes when we look at the decibel, if it were to always say, which is really interesting with the decibel, and this is why public input is so cool, that one of our residents did share some guidelines from the Government of Ontario, who does look at, from a health perspective, different decibels. So I think in the Mahone Bay one, it said about 65 is starting to get loud for decibels. According to the Government of Ontario, 60 decibels is a dishwasher. So the sound of a dishwasher. City traffic is 70 decibels, 80 decibels is a noisy restaurant, 90 decibels is very loud, according to Ontario, and that's a lawnmower. So sometimes when you are type casting that, it can become very, okay, a child cannot be out practicing their oboe, which maybe we don't want all the time, but that's where that like 3-hour and the 6-hour rule kind of comes in. So the intent is not to say, no, don't practice your oboe, even though maybe you don't want them at all. But we all live together in a community. So having a little bit of space and leeway to say, it's not always 65 decibels. Practice your oboe, just don't practice it for 3 hours straight every single day out on your back porch. Maybe that's where. So it is designed intentionally to look at like, yeah, we have outdoor events, we have restaurants who are going to play. So I think it's section 6 in the bylaw that talks specifically about like marine industrial use and restaurants and performances for businesses. And events. So really it's trying to say like, yeah, these things can still all happen. Just don't shake the walls of your neighbor's house, and, don't let it interfere with normal conversation. So it is like a bit of an education piece too. So it now gives our bylaw enforcement officer to be like, yeah, you're having an event, but your event is so loud it's shaking our house and we can't talk to one another inside. So that's grounds. It's disruptive at that point. But we're still trying to acknowledge that we're businesses, we're living, we're partying, we're doing the whole thing, but within reason. So it's designed intentionally to try to find that balance. But yeah, we're always open to exploring and making it work. And yeah.
Anybody else? Councillor Babineau.
Figured I'd just chime in because I'm the only one who hasn't talked yet. I just actually wanted to say that I'm pretty pleased with this bylaw as it stands. I fear if we start adding in decibel levels, at least at this point, and drilling down too far, we're gonna make things really uncomfortable for some folks, right? And we do all have to live together in a very small community, so I think that staff has done a great job here, and that to Jamie's point earlier, the mayor's point earlier, if we need to bring it back in 6 months to a year because we find that we do need to drill down even further, we can do that. And yeah. Oh, and your question about 100 versus 150 feet. I would have said 150 feet is fine, but I think Shania's clarification about that only being during the evening hours, I'd actually like to see that sort of close in a little bit. Just because we do have some people who live in pretty close quarters to one another, especially in Old Town. So thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Strong.
My voice will hold out here. The reasonable person standard, for the benefit of anybody that's ever done a noise complaint, is really more than just that reasonable person. They usually will go around to the neighborhood and get other people who are experiencing the same unreasonable noise, and that actually supports the whole notion of it's unreasonable for the community. So.
Anybody else? So there is a recommendation before us. Recommendation number one is anyone prepared to move that council close the public hearing? Public presentation. Skipping a point here. Sorry about that. I have one person signed after that. Irma, you're up. So we're done here.
So good evening, everyone. Mayor Myra, Deputy Mayor, councillors, staff, everybody listening. I do want to weigh in on this topic because it's affected us in the past. And I think if anybody has lived through what we have lived through at 106 Pelham, I think you would feel differently about some of the things that, or you would consider some of the things that were said and think differently about decibel levels. A few years back, well, we lived at 106 Pelham and right next to the Lunenburg Arms Hotel. And they had the fans up in the air above the roof when we bought the building. And about 10 years later, they lowered them because for maintenance reasons, it was too expensive. And they lowered them down to the ground, pointed directly at us, emanating at, I don't know, 88 decibels, super loud. We could not enjoy our property. And at the same time, we had the Delanona restaurant put a fan not 5 feet away from us, again, super loud. So we were bombarded by noise. And we approached the town and we were told, oh, yeah, the town bylaw is very vague, and it's vague because it's, it will help you out, and in the long term, it's good to be vague. So nothing happened. We made numerous complaints. Luckily, we tried to negotiate with the building owners, trying to create sound shields with Gunter and Susan at the time. Luckily, that fan only lasted a couple of years. But the fan at the Lunenburg Arms Hotel was really loud. And it is a developer, a building owner who has many other properties in town. So it's not like this problem's going to go away. I mean, luckily they closed the restaurant and the fan was removed, but it wasn't until we had numerous complaints, and it wasn't just our property, it was a neighboring property. Deputy Mayor she was the mayor at the time, so she has full recollection of just the complaints, trying to do something. We had the legal counsel go check up on it. He issued a letter to them, and his letters, at the time says, I have stood on the deck of one neighbor, and it is very clear that the noise of these fans is very loud and oppressive, which should have been enough to stand and have them do something about it. The hotel's legal counsel responded, we will assert that the bylaw itself is vague and therefore void of uncertainty. We disagree with the statement that the exhaust fan noise is extremely loud. I attended myself at the Lunenburg Arms earlier this week, and while clearly audible, I must respectfully disagree with your characterization that the noise is very loud and oppressive. That was it, that nobody could do anything. I mean, this went on for years, and the stress, my well-being, they said they would turn it off at 11 o'clock at night. They never did. That fan, if we came home, sometimes it was still running at 1 a.m. We had to call them consistently at midnight, sometimes to just like turn the fan off, turn the fan off. They can attest how aggravating it was for everybody, for them as business owners, for us as residents, and for the town dealing with all our complaints. But in the end, the town issued a letter that there is no consensus on how to address the issue in a way that will render the desired result. So nothing was done. Nothing could be done. We spent thousands of dollars consulting a lawyer. That went nowhere because they just responded and denied everything. So the owners of the Lunenburg Arm, Hamburg, basically, what was I going to say? Right. So, right. The town said, okay, we go to mediation. We tried to go to mediation. They refused. They didn't want to go to mediate. So nothing was done. Anyway, it was severely stressful, many, many years. I don't even know how many years it was. 5, 6 years, 7 years of this fan and this that we had to endure. The consensus was that without the decibel limits, pursuing this court for us, that we would have to take it to court personally, would have cost thousands of dollars. It would have been against Hamburg, it's a multinational corporation. There was no way we stood a chance. And the town was not going to go and proceed with legal proceedings when there wasn't really anything to go by, because as much as you think decibel levels aren't important, in a court of law, it's his word against ours, whether it's an oppressive noise or not an oppressive noise. So I agree with everything, Mayor said, and that we don't want to create decibel limits for every little noise complaint or neighborly complaint. But when you're dealing with consistent exhaust fan noise that runs 24/7, we need to have some standards by which contractors will understand what kind of equipment they're going to install for their clients. And that will prevent so many problems down the road. There's development that's foreseen for the parking lot on Pelham Street, that, there's many residential dwellings there. If that landowner or developer doesn't have a standard by which to say to his contractor, I want it to meet the town bylaws and standards, he could just buy the cheapest equipment, put it in any place that he wanted to, and just not care, because he doesn't live there and he doesn't really care about the residents. It's about the bottom line and what he can install to make a quick and easy installation for his HVAC system. So I agree that sound decibel limits aren't appropriate in many situations for neighbors and one-off things or events. And as Gail was mentioning, there needs to be specific rules for specific types of noise. And I think when it comes to consistent mechanical noise that is humming and vibrating directly out of your bedroom, near your bedroom window, I think we need to have some defined limits. So, I think a bylaw should be, it has to be fair for everybody. It has to be predictable. It has to consistently be applied, quantifiable and enforceable. And sound meters today are not like they were 10 years ago. There are professional grade sound meters at $200 that are easy to use and will be able to be used by a bylaw officer in a way that will protect the residents from, from this type of thing. So, and I also believe in the bylaw, it should be, it should be able to have an outdoor conversation on your own property, on your deck, and not have to be audible from only inside. If you can't have a conversation outside on your deck, I think that's problematic as well. So anyway, I would just like to, I've waited a long time for this type of bylaw to come into force because how it's affected me personally. And so I would just like to make sure it's the best bylaw that it could be. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Deputy Mayor?
Not really any questions, but to Irma's point, I do clearly remember that situation, and it was dreadful for all parties concerned, or at least for the town and the residents who registered complaints, because it and I don't know, I don't recall specifically why it wasn't enforceable as the reasonable person standard, because as she indicated and as I recalled in and thinking about that particular instance, it was clearly what one would say is, and as Lawyer Burke indicated in the letter, and I know that when it comes to RCMP, in certain instances, if it's a bylaw, it's not their responsibility; it's our responsibility, and so we have to, identify what during, excessive or what is an excessive amount of time and what is an excessive level of noise, I think, as well. And I don't know how to do that other than decibel levels and whether or not a reasonable person standard will work now because it didn't work then. So I'm again just looking for something more concrete.
Yeah, and just to speak to Irma's point as well, I think something that has changed for the benefit, not to dismiss our partnership and our services with the RCMP, is when that issue was happening, we didn't have our own bylaw enforcement officer. So I think having a bylaw enforcement officer and having Shania being able to act, which we got legal opinion on this too, rather than individual complainants having to go through what I'm sorry sounds like a really inconvenient process that you had to go through. Shania could now act as the witness and go to court with this. So she can now be the judge to say, yes, I think this, violates the bylaw and I'm going to issue a ticket. And if it were to escalate, we can do the progressive fines. And if it were continue to escalate and get to a court, Shania can go in and act. And kind of our intent there was ensuring that the residents don't have to do it themselves. So also recognizing we're in a smaller community, that sometimes you want your complaints to remain a bit confidential. So it's not the onus on you to come into court and say that. So under this bylaw, and there's always options to explore, and if the decibel thing is something folks want to look at, or a hybrid option or a mechanical option, definitely. But I think this would cover like long and persistent noise that goes on, and it would violate the quiet hours that we've put in place. And if it was interfering with conversation, or if you could feel it indoors, I think that would be something, and Shania can speak to it as the enforcement officer, but if Shania were to go and agreed that this hits the box, then a ticket would be issued and we'd start that education component. So that just shows like a little bit of extra teeth versus maybe how bylaws were approached a few years ago. Now with a bylaw enforcement officer, we have a little bit more control rather than solely relying on the RCMP to do this work for us. Not to marginalize, but just adding a little clarity.
Hi. So I can appreciate everything you're saying. I just wonder if the situation of way back happened today, would our bylaw officer be able to stand up against a multinational conglomerate with legal counsel saying, we think the noise is fine? Would the town go and spend the cost to try to prove something that's so subjective, whereby I don't know why you're afraid to actually put a line to say, this is tolerable and this is not, that is provable in court, would save a lot of legal hassle and burden of proof on the town when you're up against someone with bottomless pockets. So I don't know why you're afraid to actually put decibel limits for continuous mechanical noise. So that's my question to you.
Yep. Anybody else have anything? So we can either close the public hearing at this time, no further questions or comments, and move the recommendation, or we can send it back and come back with more updates. And it's up to council and have, I guess, another public hearing at this point, because the public would have an opportunity to speak on the revised, edited version if we do that. But it's really up to council at this point. Do we want to proceed with the recommendation, or do we want to defer it at this point, see if staff can explore a few more options, come back again, we'll have another public hearing and go from there? It's really your choice. I can't make a motion or a recommendation. I'm just, somebody has to do something. But then can we start it up again?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll close today's hearing, but if we come back with edits or changes, we'll have another public hearing. So can we, a motion to close the public hearing would be in order then at this point. So moved by Councilor Strong, second it. Councilor Babineau, all in favor, raise your right hand. Approved unanimous. Now, where would you like to go? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we ask for one more attempt to provide some further guidance with respect to the idea of continuous mechanical noise and a level for that. That would be specific to the type of noise disruption that was experienced in the past. And if there's some language, further consultation that can do that, because I do understand, the staff's arguments as well, but I think there may be an attempt or a way to make this better. So I would move that we defer for further edits.
So moves are seconder. Seconded by Councilor Fullerton. Any further discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor with the motion, raise your right hand. All those opposed, raise your right hand. Close. So motion carried 6-1 with the mayor voting in the negative. So we'll move on then. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you so much for your presentation. Remember, that's what we have these public presentations for. It's too bad more people don't attend and get involved in things like this in the budget process. But again, thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated. So we're going to move on then to the new 10.1A, which, Marvin, you're up.
Thank you. This item came about as a result of a statement of interest or a letter of interest from the second story women's center, who are the tenants at the old train station, and expressed an interest in purchasing the property. So the property owned by the town has always been leased out. It hasn't been used directly by the town for any of their town activities. And as a result of the request, one of the first steps is to declare the property as surplus to town use before the town can consider selling the property. So the town owns the old rail bed, which is the trail that is attached to the property as well. And there's some land in the back part of the train station that is part of the property. And we currently are under way with a surveying company to do a subdivision on that property. And that is well underway. So the trail, it's the intent of the town that the trail would remain in public use and owned by the town. Town would own and maintain the trail and the rest of the property. So the question of sale would be, yeah, and I think we have a map of the proposed subdivision lines. And the train station building itself would be and the two parking lots that are associated with it would be what would be in question for future sale. Public Works has a fuel tank on that property, which would be removed pending a sale. The assessed value of the property in 2024 was $383,403. The appraised value was, as of June 28th, 24, was appraised at $464,500. There's no known contamination or environmental concerns with the property. The old train station, or the former train station, is not a registered heritage property. It's and the building, if purchased by the current tenants, would remain for the same use. There's no ecological or conservation values on the property. It is adjacent to a wetland area. And before any proceeding with any sale of the property, there would be a public hearing as part of the process. And that process is defined in some part by the MGA, Section 51, but it's also part of the town's divestiture policy, which includes things like declaring the land surplus before starting a purchase negotiation, and a report and recommendation to come to council for their consideration. So that's the purpose of the recommendation that's coming forward here for the town to declare the property at 18 Dufferin Street, which would be the subdivided property, excluding the trail and the back part of the lot, for as surplus to the town's needs. So that's my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Marvin? Councillor Greek.
Through the chair, I just have one question regarding the parking situation. It said that the train station, the parking lots would be sold. In terms of the right-of-way, it says that there would be a right-of-way grant or an easement granted to the town for right-of-way to allow access to the rear of the property where there's appropriate parking available for people wishing to use the trail. Would that be remaining town-owned as a part of the land that would be retained by the town, or would there be an agreement in the sale to allow parking for the trail?
There is some parking available in the back part of the lot. So the two parking lots would be part of the sale as it stands. And the easement would just be part of the purchase and sale agreement. The other part that I haven't included in here, but the other part would be the right of first refusal on the property for a period of time to be determined if the sale comes about.
We keep the back parking lot though, the one behind, like we're selling the front parking lot and the back one immediately behind, yeah, but the one behind the gas pump we're keeping, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Any other questions, Deputy Mayor?
So I apologize. I was away for a bit and didn't get a chance to look this through as thoroughly as I'd like. So the relevant legislation that's noted in the report mentions the evaluation criteria in Appendix A, and I'm not sure if that was included in the or I don't see that included in this report. So it was probably something I needed to check out further, and I'm just not sure what that.
So the criteria that are listed in the Appendix A in our policy is all
Yes.
covered in items that I've included in the.
Okay. So it's all been covered. Thank you. Okay. The other question I have, if I may, Your Worship, is just with respect to the boundary lines that were shown in the chart that's accompanying the report, and the red boundary lines that are well, I guess it's maybe the pink that are showing what would be declared surplus for potential divestiture. I wonder, and I guess maybe further to Councillor Greek's question, if it's not better serving the town to reserve rather than to be dependent upon a right-of-way being granted and through the sale, to actually retain ownership of the access route to the back parking lot. Otherwise, it is landlocked, so to speak, except for a right-of-way that is owned, and the upkeep would be, therefore dependent upon the owner. And I would, as that's a significant town asset, parking to accommodate access to our back harbor trail. I wondered if we couldn't consider a boundary line that would provide for the town to maintain and the access route to the back parking lot and carve that off separately, which would be part of the property that's to the right of the building, according to the diagram that's shown.
The big question on that is if we have enough room for offsets. So if we retained enough room for a driveway or an entrance to the very back part of the lot, we would be narrowing in the boundary lines around the building so tight that I don't know if we can meet the subdivision requirements. It's something we can look into and I have asked the question, but I'm not sure that there's enough room there to do that. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does, although it doesn't ease my concern
Yeah.
about. So I would prefer that we look into that.
So we are still dealing with a surveying company, and we can certainly look into that further.
Thank you.
Anybody else? This is really just step one in a fairly lengthy process. So this is just a declared surplus so we can get to the next phase. So there is a recommendation in front of us. The town of Lunenburg declare the property at 18 Dufferin Street, old train station, as surplus and no longer required for town purposes. Is there somebody prepared to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Babineau. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Strong. Is there any further discussion or questions on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And got to mention this before, but if second story folks are here and they'd like to enjoy the beautiful evening, you don't have to stick around for the rest of the meeting. This is your chance to run. So we'll move on to 10.1. We're going to start with we're on the budget process right now. So nobody signed down to speak on the budget, but the floor is open. If anybody would like to take the mic and speak on the budget, this is an open mic time. It's budget questions and comments. If anyone's wanting to speak, okay, nobody wants to speak. So we're going to move on to the draft 25-26 capital and operating budgets for town, water utility, electric utilities. So whichever staff is Kathleen, are you taking this away? Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. This is our third budget meeting of the 25-26 budget season. The agenda package includes recommendations for the approval of the town general, water utility, and electric operating and capital budgets. On April 29th, council were presented the draft of the 25-26 budget and a presentation that gave an overview of all capital projects and operating initiatives for the 25-26 fiscal year. On May 13th, 2025, staff were on hand to answer any questions in relations to the budgets for the 25-26 fiscal year. The first budget is the town capital budget. The proposed town capital budget, which is found on page 28 to page 36 of your agenda package, is $4.69 million for the 25-26 fiscal year, with proposed funding of $1.65 million from reserves, $1.606 million from grants and donations, $501,000 from the District 1 and 2 and the Fire Department, and borrowing of $1.469 million. The second part of the town section is the town operating budget. This is found on page 37 to 93 of your agenda package, and the town operating budget totals $11.317 million. As noted in the previous sessions, there are no proposed changes to the property tax rates this year, with the rates remaining at $1.376 per 100 of assessment, and the commercial rate remaining at $3.358 per $100 of assessment. The sewer rates are proposed to increase by 2.3% to assist with the rising costs associated with operating and maintaining the town's wastewater system. So the agenda package includes two recommendations regarding the 25-26 capital and operating budgets. So Mayor Myra, if you would like, I can read the motions or answer any questions.
Okay, does anybody around the table have any questions for staff? Deputy Mayor.
I just want to thank staff, I guess, just starting out, because I had a multitude of questions in between meetings after going through the document again, and they were wonderful in supplying me with the information that I asked for. I'm pleased to know that the track upgrades are included in some of the funds that are allocated for under community development, and that beautification project of more trees coming to town are being, that grant funds are being explored to cover those things. The one item that I would question further, though, is the, in response to my query with respect to line item under economic or under community development is for the staff position for economic development officer. And I've wondered about the need for that position in the long term, and I look to my colleagues to weigh in on this as well, because I would actually propose putting forth a motion to just because it's included in the budget, separate from the budget, that we consider requesting that hiring for that position be put on hold until such time as our new CAO is in place and has had a chance to assess the situation and properly advise us on the necessity of another full-time staff position or the replacement of that full-time staff position.
Okay, I can address that. The position hasn't been position description hasn't been fully developed at this point, but there is need in community development for an additional staff person to do things like apply for grants and assist with other activities in the community development area. And so, but certainly we can put that on hold until the new CAO is in place, and it's not a problem.
So the motion that the deputy mayor made is that in order? Then do we need a motion?
Not
Sure.
really.
We don't, I'm just,
For this, if I may, just procedurally, if the intent is that the money, and if anyone pipe in here if I'm misinterpreting, because money is not my expertise at all. But if the intent is to not remove it from the budget and just sit there for a time, I think, CAO Marvin has the direction, and the intent is that there's not a fleshed out job description, but perhaps the money stays in the pot for, maybe October or November. So motion if you were to try to remove money from the budget. Kathleen's looking at me like, no.
I think that personally that we would approve it as is, and that we would just make note in our minutes that that was a question that was asked by council to follow up with our new CAO.
and I'm fine with that, but I'll just throw my 2 cents in. Being somebody that spoke highly against an economic development officer position with the previous council before I sat in this chair, I'd be a hypocrite if I said I supported the role of an economic development officer. Me personally might be more the way the title is or the way the role is worded. I certainly think that grants in those positions, but when you hear the word economic development officer in a lot of communities, you think of somebody going out there driving the economy, bringing, business to a business park, for example, if you had a business park, which we don't unless somebody didn't tell me about it, right? So we, the last time they hired someone, the question around the community is, what are they going to do? What are they doing? What did they do when they left, right? So I'm fine with leaving it in the budget, because I'm not saying we don't need somebody in a position at a certain level. I just hate the name economic development officer, because it's not really what the person in this job is going to be doing, in my opinion. So I'm okay with leaving it there. I'm not okay with that title. Anybody else? Okay, so there's 2 recommendations in front of us. Oh, Councilor Fullerton.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment, on the heels of your comment that, I agree that there's an opportunity for someone in that level in a blended role in the community. But since the CAO says that the job description is still in development and the incoming permanent CAO will want to weigh in on it, I think that it's great to leave it there and then just come back to it. As Kayla said, I agree with that.
Anybody else? Okay. Are we ready to move on to the recommendations? There are two recommendations in front of us. If Kathleen would like to read the first one out and someone can move it.
The first recommendation is that council approve the 25-26 town general capital budget as presented totaling $4,690,000.
So it's a recommendation. Is someone here to move that? Moved by Councillor Fullerton. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greek. Any further discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Kathleen, you want to read the second one?
This one may take a bit. Recommendation to council that council approve the 25-26 town general operating budget as presented totaling $11,318,200 with the following tax rates. Residential tax rate of 1.376 cents per $100 of assessment. Commercial tax rate of $3.35.8 per $100 of assessment. Seasonal tourist rate of $2.519 per $100 of assessment. Residential sewer rate of 735.38 cents per dwelling unit. Non-residential sewer rates of 0.7027 cents per 100 of assessment, and the church sewer rate of $431.91 per quarter.
You've heard the recommendation. Is someone prepared to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Babineau. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Daphne. Any further discussion or question on that motion? Seeing none. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much to all the staff. I know that the finance department especially, and directors and department heads and everybody worked extremely hard over the past 2 months or so, really putting this final document together. There were a lot of long weekends, I think, spent on this document, and a lot of long nights back and forth with directors and folks. There's been some changes throughout the process. I'd also like to thank those from the public that did actually show up and speak. That's what the public process is intended for. So again, thank you very much. It's unfortunate, more didn't attend and speak, but thank you. I'd also like to confirm that we've already ordered Larson hot dogs for Canada Day, so they're on hold. So we have lots of great hot dogs this year, and we ordered double the amount of any other year. So we're good to go, Robert. So it's all good. Okay. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for this. Counselors, for the 5 that are new. If this document wasn't overwhelming at one point in time when you were reviewing it and blow your mind, then you're great humans, because my first budget ever scared the living crap out of me. So again, thank you to everyone. It was a great team effort. And Deputy Mayor? With the water one, yeah, but this was the big one. We had all kinds of recommendations, but this was water and electrical, and it's all important. It's the tax rate that everybody's listens for on this. So thank you very much. The rate has been held, and again, it's probably the first time that I've sat around this table that we actually had citizens come this time and say that it might be soon time to look at an increase in the tax rate. So again, thank you very much, folks. So we'll move on to the next part. Kathleen?
The water capital budget, the proposed water capital budget, which is found on page 95 to 97 of your agenda package, totals $2.195 million for the 25-26 fiscal year. The proposed funding for this budget is $1,322 million from the depreciation reserve, borrowing of $788,000, and grants of $85,000.
Are there any questions for Kathleen for the water utility capital budget? Go ahead.
The next budget before us this evening is the water operating budget. On page 98 to page 103 of your agenda package, you will find the water operating budget. The total proposed water operating budget is $1.78 million for the 25-26 fiscal year.
Any questions for Kathleen on that part? There are no questions. we should probably do those two recommendations first. If you want to read them again. And
The water utility capital recommendation to council that council approve the 25-26 water utility capital budget as presented, totaling $2,195,000.
someone prepare to move that. Moved by Councillor Creek. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Strong. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. Kathleen?
The water utility operating budget recommendation to council that council approve the 25-26 water utility operating budget as presented, totaling $1,783,800.
So we're prepared to move that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Daphne. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Fullerton. Any further discussion or question on that motion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Kathleen?
Our third budget this evening is the electric utility capital. The proposed electric capital budget, which is found on page 105 to page 108 of your agenda package, totals $3.243 million for the 25-26 fiscal year. The proposed funding for this budget is $420,000 from the depreciation reserve and borrowing of $2.823 million.
Any questions on this part of the budget? Okay, Kathleen?
On page 109 to page 115 of your agenda package, you will find the electric operating budget. The total proposed electric operating budget is $8.505900 for the 25-26 fiscal year.
Any questions on this budget? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to the recommendations.
Recommendation to council that council approve the 25-26 electric utility capital budget as presented, totaling $3,243,000.
Moved by Councillor Strong. Is there a seconder? Councillor Babineau. Any further discussion on that recommendation? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous.
And the electric utility operating recommendation is that council approve the 25-26 electric utility operating budget as presented, totaling $8,505,900.
So we're prepared to move that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Fullerton. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Strong. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Okay, so we've been all over the place on this agenda. So now we have 10.3, public statements policy amendments. And Kayla.
Yeah, thanks. So I can just do a quick overview of how we got here, just as a refresher. So council first reviewed these amendments to the public statement policy at its May Committee of the Whole meeting. At that time, staff recommended a few housekeeping edits, primarily the creation of an annual flag raising appendix, so we don't have to keep coming back for flag raisings that council generally supports each year, just to streamline that process a little bit. At that Committee of the Whole meeting, councillors around the table had a couple of edits, so we believe we've captured the things that councillors wanted to see, so we've highlighted those in yellow. One thing that we did catch, which, sorry, that should have all made sense, the streamlining of the annual proclamations table that we've also added. So a great example is the Access Awareness Week. They typically come each year to ask for a flag raising and ask for a proclamation. So just to streamline that request, we could add them to the annual proclamation table in Appendix A as well. So if council has any questions about that, happy to answer them. And if not, the recommendation is there to approve this amendment.
Are there any questions or concerns or comments you'd like to fire at Kayla? Deputy Mayor?
No, I just want to thank Kayla for taking all of those recommendations, because we talked quite at length at our Committee of the Whole meeting with regard to this. So I think it's really a great policy at this point. And I still have a bit of a reservation with regard to a new CAO coming, and their understanding of at what point and for whom lowering of flags and that sort of thing would be appropriate without some more specific guidelines, but I am happy to leave it as it is at this point, and think the opportunity of having a new CAO come in and seeing if there's any shortcomings with it as it's written, or if it's, just my overthinking things, it's a good opportunity for us to test the policy, in action. So I'd be happy to move that we accept the amended policy as it's written currently.
So move the deputy mayor. Is there a seconder? Yep, Councillor Daphne. Any discussion or question? I'd just like to add, I really like in all these policy amendments and draft bylaw changes that the way staff have been highlighting things that have been discussed at these meetings, and when they put them in yellow. So it really stands out that we can really remember what was said maybe a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and it brings it back to our attention as we're reviewing it. So again, thank you very much to staff for doing that. There's a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Okay, so now we are 11.1, proposed town boundary expansion, letter to modal. So I'm trying to find that. You have that?
There's no staff.
Okay. Yeah, Marvin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Up on the screen and in front of you, I believe you have a map description of where the modal and Town of Lunenburg boundary intersects at Wolf Avenue and Wood Street in the Salt Meadows area. And there's been discussion between modal and the town to look at a change to the boundary line that would keep that very short triangle or small triangle in the Salt Meadow and town boundary. And it made sense to both the town and to modal, but the request through their CAO to myself was that the town provide a motion to ask modal to join in this request through to the Utility and Review Board to have the boundary line changed so that that district is basically all within the town boundary after that change. So that's and this all happened, the request came in like within the last week. So that's why I felt it important to bring it forward on a timely basis and get a letter off to modal if that's what the town wishes to do.
Thank you, Marvin. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I just want to comment, first of all, that I think this makes so much sense, given that the subdivision has been, or the neighborhood has been created, and this is somewhat of a long-standing issue with the unusual boundary line cutting through, what has been created as a town street. And so cleaning this up does make a whole lot of sense. And I'm pleased to know that our neighboring municipality is been favorably disposed to working with us to have this change made. So I would certainly move that council prepare or make the request of municipality of the District of Lunenburg to have to approve a shared request to the thank you. That council approve the direct staff to send a letter to municipality, the District of Lunenburg Council, proposing the boundary expansion as shown in the presented map of Wolf Avenue and Wood Street.
So it's moved. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Daphne. Any further discussion or question on the motion? I'd just like to thank staff for basically looking into this when we brought it to their attention at a meeting a little while ago. And we just were talking because it was highlighted to us actually even during campaign time that there was one apartment or townhouse over there that I'm not sure it's in town, but part of the townhouse is out of town. So I'm not sure where they voted, but anyways, it's like it didn't make sense to any of us. Plus, it really straightens out the planning document. So now the people over there that own that little V would have to fall under town planning rules if this proceeds. So again, I want to thank staff, and there's a motion in front of us. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much. So 12, notice of motion, information requests, and council reports. I'll start tonight to my left, Councillor Fullerton.
I have nothing to report tonight.
Councillor Greek.
Nothing for tonight, thank you.
Councillor Babineau. Councillor Strong.
A couple of things. Some of council members and I participated in the Alzheimer walk at the LCLC this weekend. It was lovely. And we were joined by our MLA. And on my whole thing of birthdays, I neglected to mention that it was Jamie Dean's, our newest employee in the communications area. I want everyone to know that celebrated a birthday this past week. And Jan Ladder, who I know is listening in right now. Happy birthday, Jan. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Daphne. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I would actually just like to mention the fact that I had just returned this afternoon from attending the annual general meeting and subsequent information session of TIANS, the Tourism Industry Association of Nova Scotia meeting, which was held in Fox Harbour, which was extremely informative. And I think it's very worthwhile to hear what's going on in an industry that is so important to Lunenburg, and to understand more fully the role we play. I sent the picture to my colleagues of the picture that was displayed at the opening of the meeting, which was, of course, the money shot of the Town of Lunenburg waterfront. So it just goes to show the clout that we have in that industry and the influence we have. And so it was a wonderful meeting, and I can report more fully to council when I can turn my head to that. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for attending. I'm sure it was Fox Harbor is a little special. It's a very nice podcast. So again, thank you so much. And I'd just like to mention that I leave tomorrow to go to Ottawa to represent the town at the FCM. So I want to thank my colleagues for sending me to Ottawa. Last year it was in Calgary. This year it's in Ottawa. So when I get back, I'll have a update on what was discussed. There are sessions all day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and part of Sunday, and then a closing on Sunday night. So thank you very much. I fly out tomorrow, so thanks. So we'll move on to number 13. There's actually, due to a lack of agenda items for committee of the whole discussion, it is suggested that council cancel the scheduled June 3rd, 2025 COTW meeting. So what I need is I need a motion. This should be difficult. The council canceled the scheduled June 3rd, 2025 committee of the whole meeting. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Councillor Babineau. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Motion actionless is just there for information at this point. And now I just need a motion to move into closed session. Move by Councillor Fullerton or Babineau. Seconder by the other one. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the lovely evening. This is probably one of the nicest ones we've had so far.